You're listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Here are your hosts, Fran Chismar and Tom Kinesic.
Probably shouldn't encourage us. Welcome back to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast presented by Pinelands Nursery. I am Fran Chismar.
And I'm Tom Kinesic, and I'm not sure if our listeners realize the door they just opened here.
Oh, it was a bad door to open, I think.
But we would like to say thank you to Not Raquel. I don't even know.
Not Raquel Welch.
Raquel, right?
Yes.
Not Raquel Welch for her 5-star review and giving us a lot of love on the Buzz. We said last time how much we enjoy doing the Buzz episodes where just Fran and I. So it's nice to hear that you guys like them as well.
Feedback is always good. Sometimes you're throwing things out there and it just kind of gets lost in dead space. So it's nice to hear that, you know, that kind of feedback.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah, and we also want to thank Vicky for her 5-star review. And she left some really kind words on our Native Plants Healthy Planet Facebook group. That was super nice.
Yeah, that was very flattering. But you also gave us here's where you shouldn't encourage us. You also gave us the green light to go off topic, which is all you got to do is say it once and we're off topic. Yeah. So I've been dying to have a conversation with Tom about pizza ever since we had the cheesesteak conversation with John Park.
Yeah.
So I want to talk to you about that.
Okay.
So
we can do it.
So based on what you and your wife have been doing, you started visiting top-ranked pizza places in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yep.
Now, was it for any particular pizza style or
there was a NJ.com list that came out that said the best pizza in New Jersey. And if you guys don't know, if you're not from New Jersey, our governor has declared New Jersey the pizza capital of the world.
Yes.
And pizza's a big thing in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut,
Philadelphia.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And
not saying that other parts of the country don't have good pizza. I'm not saying that at all, but it's kind of a mecca in this area, I think, for good pizza.
And we're very close to a couple really good spots that were on that top 10 list. But, so we said, well, these are all ones that are within half an hour. So we went to a couple, and there's some other ones that had, like, cult following, so we went to those too. So we went to, I think it was like 6 or 7 that were on that list, and then a bunch of others that were just well-known in the area.
So for us, because we're in close to Trenton, New Jersey, Trenton is famous for its tomato pie. And 2 of the top are DiLorenzo's and Papa's, which actually Barstool Sports, they were 2 of the highest ranked.
Yeah. I think one was like an 8.9 and one was a 9.2, 9.3, something
DiLorenzo's
like that.
I think was 9.3.
And then the highest he ever gave was a 9.4.
So we're spoiled by that. But I know one that was high on your list is, I don't know if it's Brico or Brico.
I've always said Brico.
I've always said Brico,
it's
too.
It's a fancy place, so I figured it's had a fancy name.
Yes, in Westmont, New Jersey. And they do coal-fired oven pizza. So we did get the tomato pie there, but it gives us a different nuance because it's coal-fired.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed that. You're right.
Yeah, that was for my wife and I's list. That was our favorite.
Okay.
That was where we enjoyed the most. Because it was a little bit fancier. Like, you could get some different stuff. I think they had, like, braised short rib on a pizza. You could get, like, honey and soppressata. You could get some really interesting combinations, and it was really, really tasty.
And it had that thin crust with like a tomato pie should be very thin crusted and almost burnt. Now, Claudia, are you a pizza fan? Like, do you?
I love pizza. Yes.
Do you have do you have a favorite? Like, is there a place that you've had pizza that you're like, this is the best pizza I've ever had?
I think some of these memories go back to having pizza in Italy. But I love homemade pizza and just going out in the garden and throwing some fresh tomatoes and spinach on it, and enjoying it with a few friends. That's usually the best.
Tom's right before the podcast. Tom's brother Steve was just throwing him love for Tom. Apparently, you make a really good like cast iron pizza.
I do like cast iron or just right on the grill, and then same kind of concept where I just go out in the garden, get some tomatoes, get some basil, just some other stuff, and see what I come up with. And
I'm not that talented.
I'm with you.
I have to rely on finding out where the good places are and going there. Yeah. So, but I did find that, like we talked about cheesesteaks, it's really hard to judge. Like, when you've had a good pie, but in your head, can you go back and really say that Di Lorenzo's is better than Papa's or Papa's is better than Di Lorenzo's? It's hard. It's hard yeah. Because every time you go, you might have a different experience too. Like there's a place in I can't remember the town that it's in, but it's called Holy Tomato. That does.
That was down in that same like Haddonfield, Westmont area too.
Yeah,
right?
And it's Blackwood. It's in Blackwood, New Jersey. And the first couple times I had it was incredible, and the last time I had it, I was like, something's I don't know.
And it's such a personal preference too, because what was number one on that NJ.com list was in I think it was Brooklyn Square Pizza in Jackson, New Jersey, and I thought it was top 2 or 3 for me, and my wife thought it was the worst one, the ones that we went to.
Wow.
So it's a personal preference as well.
It is, and it changes. And like even with cheesesteaks, I think I've changed what my top cheesesteak was. I think I found that my favorite cheesesteak is whatever place I'm having a cheesesteak at that moment. Like, oh, this is the best cheesesteak. Yeah. And I've said that 20 times. Easy.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to keep us posted on the next one.
I will.
But for now, we should reel it back in.
Okay. All right.
Keep it a little more focused on the plants.
All right. Well, just real quick. So last this is going to be all over the place. This is my mind on a normal day. So one of our customers who, I love when we get to visit places that we've been selling to that we haven't really seen. Yeah. So I went to a candlelit pumpkin walk at Sadler's Woods, which is an old growth forest down in the Haddonfield area, which I was so like they have beech with 13-foot diameter.
Wow.
Wow. I've never been through an old growth forest like that, and it's in the middle of it's 6 miles outside of Philadelphia. It's kind of hard to believe that it's there and hasn't been touched. Yeah. And they do a wonderful job preserving that. So I think some of those trees are like 300 years old.
That's incredible.
So the Sadler's Woods Conservation Association doing a wonderful job. If you ever get a chance and you're in that area, please go visit it because you won't regret it.
Yeah. My wife and I are going to have to check that out after you send a couple of the pictures over. We'll have to wait next year for the pumpkin walk, but it just looked like a cool spot to go.
My only complaint about the pumpkin walk, it was 10 minutes.
Yeah.
They do a path and it's all lit with pumpkins that were carved for a competition, which is great, but you need to go back and spend time in it.
But moving on to today's guest, we have a very special guest who chimed in a little bit already.
Yes.
But we have a very special guest today, one of my favorite people in the industry. I think one of yours too, Fran.
Mine as well, yeah.
She's a landscape designer, plant advocate, public speaker, a critically acclaimed author, and probably most importantly, a listener-requested guest that we're finally getting on.
Yeah.
So,
I love that when that happens.
So with that, please welcome Claudia West.
Wow, thank you. You're too kind. But I'm truly honored to be on your show today, and just want to thank you for putting together such an amazing podcast. And I know it takes a lot of work and passion to put together such an amazing program and fill it with fresh content and interesting speakers. So we're really grateful for this amazing resource. So I'm honored to be here today.
I got to be honest, it's getting harder and harder. When we first start, I was thinking about this today. When we first started this, there was no pressure at all. Yeah. It was really loose, and it's like whatever. But now that we have a following and the guests are getting, I don't want to say better, but we're getting guests that maybe we thought
more high
profile guests. It's stressful. Like I'm starting to get stressed. So it's kind of funny finding the time to do it, wanting to do a great job and put together a great show, but trying to keep it loose at the same time.
But it's always nice when it's high-profile people that we also know.
Yes.
It makes it a little bit easier to have those conversations.
Right. And I get the sense that the topic itself is getting more and more relevant as well and more urgent. So I think the fact that you have such an amazing listening audience is a really good sign that something needs to happen on a much larger scale here. We no longer have this luxury of waiting.
Totally, and it keeps changing, as it goes along, and we're trying to go along with it. But from what you actually just said, though, one of the things that that we ask a lot of our guests, and we try to keep it on the positive side. But we always ask if it's too late for what's going on and what we need to do to preserve nature. We always ask our guests if they feel it's too late. But the one thing that I really took away from your book, and it was really at the very beginning, you make a declaration that it's never too late. And for our listeners that maybe haven't read your book yet, can you describe just what you noticed from your childhood, where you grew up, and where it's at now, and those changes that have taken place? Because I thought that was such a great picture you painted, that nature has perseverance and can survive.
Yeah, I think it's a hopeful message that, I try to carry into the world based on my background and where I come from. I was raised in Eastern Germany, so I think I can officially say that the country I was born in no longer exists, which is in many ways a good thing. Yeah. And I do remember that time clearly through a child's perspective. So my family, parents have a very different perspective. But what I do remember so clearly is a very depleted state. An incredible amount of pollution and devastation, high-intensity agriculture and factories that let their affluent right into streams and rivers. This all changed dramatically with the fall of the wall and reunification of Germany. And we have experienced a dramatic amount of healing in landscapes that we thought would be beyond repair. So that gives me the energy and the knowledge to really believe that it is never too late. It may be too late for nature as we know it, but as we all know that it's a gradient. There are many forms of nature. In a way, an old parking lot with a few wild plants growing in it is also nature, but maybe not desirable nature.
Yeah.
So I think it's really encouraging to see that not everything is lost, and that we can see change and ecological intensification and increase in biodiversity and ecosystem functions, even in a very small amount of time. In my short lifetime, I've already seen landscapes heal that were gray and dark and incredibly polluted just a few decades ago. So that's a hopeful message and foundation for a landscape designer to practice on.
Oh, totally. And it's so cyclical both ways too. It's my fiance grew up in communist Poland, and she grew up on a farm, and it was very rural, and now she sees that area isn't very rural anymore. And she's seeing it kind of go the other way, and she's like, oh, I remember the forest, and I remember this, and it's changing, but it all seems very cyclical, and you realize once it's gone what you're missing. But you did mention natives, and one of the things that we bring up a lot is what is native. We have an internal struggle here, and a lot of our customers do, like, what is native? What period are we restoring to? And those lines are really muddied. It's hard to tell. In your opinion, is there a new native? Are natives as we know them different now? Is it a new phase for us?
I think there have always been different definitions of what native is. I have a more European perspective on that, and for most European planting designers, it has always been less about where a plant comes from, for certain historic reasons as well, and more about what does it actually do. And I'm really sometimes I'm sad when I hear conversations get stuck in this never-ending circle of trying to identify how far back do we go, or how many miles away from our project site should we draw a line and say outside of this line it is no longer native or appropriate to plant it. Because I honestly think that we can't make these decisions, that all these lines we draw are rather arbitrary. So I think a way forward here and out of this never-ending circle might be to ask instead, what does it do? And to get better at understanding what functions species have, how they interact with their ecosystems, what they bring to a certain design challenge, how they behave with each other and everybody else in that ecosystem. I think once we start relaxing, this discussion and focus on what really matters, it will help us create better planting designs, because not every plant that might be native to your immediate area has super high ecological function. Thinking about some species like ferns, for example, that will never see a pollinator on them. So it's just a much more nuanced conversation. And what I find so encouraging is that, at least in my perspective, it feels like more and more professionals are shifting their attention to learning more about the functional aspects of plants, and are trying to make more educated decisions about including these plants into their designs based on what they bring to the table, and not based on exactly where specifically they come from.
And that's a great point you just made. And I was given we had a socially distanced tour for a local community college this morning, and we kind of brought something similar to that topic up, how there's so many functions that plants have beyond the aesthetic. And I guess I was kind of complaining about landscape architects. What was really happening. I was saying how, because they were asking about survival rates in projects. And I guess I said we find architects who really pay attention to the conditions the plants are going in and the function they want it to perform have better success than the ones who say, I want something that's pink here. And just kind of go for the aesthetic of what it's supposed to look like versus the functions it's supposed to perform.
And I think you could easily have two sides that are just arguing what's best, and it doesn't work at all unless there's some kind of middle ground that's found. So when I started my career 30 plus years ago, I started on the ornamental side of the industry, and then I switched to the ecological side about 13 years ago. And from a design standpoint, I kind of felt like at that time there was nothing in common between those two sides. It was just two sides. And I kind of feel, Claudia, that your methodology bridges the gap in between those two sides. And you've found a middle ground which makes perfect sense. And I thought maybe you could talk about that a little bit and kind of what led you to that revelation of marrying those two sides together.
Yeah, that's a really deep question, and I think I'm going to try to answer this in a intelligent way. But I think what I find so frustrating is when so much energy gets spent on discussions which are often very heated, emotional, and often based on anecdotic evidence. When right now our world is falling apart, it certainly feels that way. And what we need more than anything is action and a united front. So I think that to really work at the scale that our planet needs right now, horticulture, ecological horticulture, land management, restoration, conservation, all of these different subgroups within what we sometimes call our industry or our profession. I think it's important that we work together more than ever before. I've never really seen, horticulture and ecological planting design as being two separate things. I think that traditional horticulture has to become more ecological. I think that native planting design has to learn from horticulture, and maybe there's room for aesthetic improvements and adding more emotional content to planting. And quite frankly, restoration, conservation, all of these different professions can no longer ignore people. People are a part of the solution, as true wild places hardly exist anymore on the planet. So I think that maybe the future, the solution is to be more inclusive and not only teach our profession, but also practice this art of working with plants and taking care of the planet in a more holistic way, where we can all learn from one another and speak a clear voice together to reach the folks who need to hear us, quite frankly.
That's one of the things that we've noticed from the podcast with many of our guests. They all maybe are working in different areas, but the common goal is really all the same. Everyone's trying to accomplish the same thing, but you have all these groups working separately that really could do a lot more work if they join together. And that's we're actually been really happy that some of our guests have asked to talk to other guests, and some of our customers have asked to talk to guests to see if they can collaborate to do things. But I think that's one thing when you're all in the ecological restoration side of the industry, but you need to work, both sides need to work together somehow. And I kind of never thought there was a way that would happen. I thought like they were almost enemies, but the way you approach it, and it's your book and also your partner, it's Tim, is it Rayner?
That's Rayner, yes.
Rayner, okay. You know, so the two of you found just a way to describe it that makes sense. And it's traditionally something different than what we talk about here on the podcast. You know, we're typically staying with the restoration side, but it's better if you have people that are incorporating the message than ignoring the message.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely necessary that we break down these inherited barriers and learn more about what we all have in common. We all care about the future of our children, and we all love hiking through a forest that surprises us with lush and thriving life, or through a prairie, right, with sparkling with colors. So I think we can no longer afford working in these different segments. And I think that, in our profession, with every project or every customer here on the nursery side, we can reach. We should really try to, preach the outside of the choir and teach more about the deeper motivations and techniques that are unique to our part of what we do, just to increase awareness of all these other tools that we have available but might not see because we think that they live in a different part of that profession.
Yeah.
So I think that's really so important that we reach more people outside of our little native plant bubble at a scale where it's absolutely necessary and needed. Yeah.
You know, if you get the right person to have that discussion too, I find you I've gotten to see you speak on numerous occasions, and you're a very inspirational speaker. You leave one of your...
You're too kind.
Oh, no problem. It's very true. But you leave your session at very uplifting, thinking, yes, this will work. We can do these things. And there's a few people that we've had, the Prairie Preacher. There's people like that just when you hear them talk, they're spreading a much wider message.
Right.
But one of the things you did touch on was emotion. And one of the things that stuck out for me in your book was introducing the principle that native plant design is as much emotional as it is functional. And sometimes when you're dealing with it every day, it's easy to look at it as a thing of function. But that connection is more than just a transference of energy, because we're very emotional when you see a beautiful prairie or woods. How is it for you as a designer or architect to strike that emotional balance between function and emotion?
So I think that this emotional content or evocative quality that planting can create is key in reconnecting us with wild things, with the green things out there, with our home, where we all come from, as people. I'm sometimes really frustrated when I see mulch choking out a little bit of life and emotion that planting is trying to keep, and folks are continuing down this downward spiral just because it's in some kind of specification, or this is what you've always been doing. I think that as people who are losing nature and inspiring natural places at an alarming rate, we need the planted areas around our houses, in our parks, along our city streets, to bring some of this back for our own physical and psychological health. I think as people, we shouldn't demand any less than beautiful emotional planting. We should not accept anything that is not lush and thriving, because we now have all of these tools available to create and maintain planting like this. The science of planting design has made huge advances just in the last few decades. And there is no longer an excuse why all these plantings that surround our parking lots, our grocery stores, our libraries, you name it, couldn't do better. I think there's a huge opportunity here to bring more beauty into all of our lives, not just privileged neighborhoods in areas where the luxury of gardening can be afforded, but also in other parts of cities where communities desperately need all the benefits that plants and beautiful planting bring to the table.
Yeah, when you see it done right, it definitely catches your eye. And I'll be honest, from my standpoint, you have people that when they approach it, when you see a parking lot or a business complex that isn't done right, you understand some people view it as a job, and you get bogged down in your job sometimes. Even for as much as we love nature and plants, it's still, you can be in it because you love it, but it's still a job, and sometimes that can still bog you down. Now, I know I'm not one to complain, but Tom, you've heard me complain. It's easy to get bogged down because it's you're dealing with maybe people that have different philosophies or different ideologies, and
different knowledge levels.
It makes it different, or they're in. You do have an industry sometimes where people are just in it for the money; they're not in it for the love of it. So it takes on different approaches.
That's a really good point. And I think the money could actually be a reason not to do, a mulch-dominated landscape that requires regular sprayings of Roundup to keep it looking, under control. There are several planting systems that are being developed and are very successful in Europe that address exactly that maintenance concern, and have shown that if plantings that have incredibly dense vegetation with all the emotional color themes and beautiful color and texture aspects can actually cost a fraction of what a more traditional planting would cost. So I think that the wonderful thing about what we do is that we have several tools available to us to sell what we do and what we believe is right as a solution, depending on how our clients define the problem. For some, it's entirely maintenance related. For others, it's the skill level required to manage and maintain a system like that. Or there are other motivations. So I think the beautiful thing about, the cross-pollination that is happening between professionals in the world, because of podcasts like yours and many others, and, books that are written and still have to be written, that we learn from one another and find more of these tools to improve these opportunities that we all, come across sometimes on a daily basis.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I apologize.
That's fine. Go ahead.
One of the things that we always talk about is you have to continue to be curious, and you have to continue to learn. And it's easy to get stuck in the wheelhouse of what you know and what you do well. Like, I think a lot of these landscape design companies do what they've always done, and they know it well, and they'll do a planting with the mulch because they want the maintenance. They want to spray. They want that. They want to say, hey, we can come back 2 or 3 times a year, and we'll mulch it every spring. We'll and edge the beds, and we'll do this. But I think we've not, even nature doesn't go on. You have to take care of it. It doesn't take care of itself. So there's maintenance in a very good ecologically sound place. It's just a different ideology. If it's just getting the word out there, and that's the hardest thing. Yeah. Some people don't want to hear it. Some people just don't know it exists.
True. Yeah, right. But I couldn't agree more with what you just said, that nature or natural systems require maintenance. I think that is such an important message right there. Learning more and more about the United States, which is a new country for me. I'm, catching up. But I'm learning that what I first thought of as, I perceived as being wilderness, the American forest, all these lands, with wild creatures in them and incredible biodiversity, it's actually an ancient cultural landscape, not that different from cultural landscapes that I have observed in many other parts of the world, all across Europe and China, you name it. Humans and their actions, their land management, them culturing things in many different ways, often actually created more biodiversity and more stable systems, and shaped systems that, with the breakdown of some of these old management cultures, is now shifting into a new reality, and that's where we are right now. So I firmly believe that land can be better with people managing and maintaining it. And my husband and I, we managed a family farm up in northern Baltimore County in Maryland, and we see that actions that we now take that try to mimic some of the old land use that used to happen here not that long ago actually lead to pretty quick improvements in species diversity and ecological function. So I think that is a really important layer of our attitude towards land. So well said.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%.
Yeah, we had, to paint a really good picture of this, we had Dr. Dwayne Estes on from Southeastern Grasslands Initiative, and he just talked about the importance of fire, and he explained some of these southern pine savannas, very similar to our New Jersey pine barrens, where if you go through, you have the pine trees, might have some blueberries or inkberry holly underneath, some greenbrier, and not much else. But just by cutting down some of the trees or having a fire come through, it increased the diversity tenfold, and it was amazing some of the seeds that were in the seed bank. And for his organization's purposes, they're looking at grasslands versus these pine savannas. They were saying we're good at planting trees, we aren't good at creating all this really high quality and more diverse habitat in grasslands. But he painted a beautiful picture of how that really is. And then Sam Droege, one of our first episodes, he kind of said the same thing. It was with editing, is what he called it. And he just kind of went through and, I'd edit this out, but it created all this other potential for other things.
We just, speaking with one of our customers, we were talking with Mark Gallagher at Princeton Hydro, and they were working on a project on a waterway not far from the nursery that was all completely covered in frag, and they were removing the frag to kind of think, Phragmites, just to think what they were going to do next. And they were really surprised that in the seed bank, pickerel weed came back, duck potato came back, cattails came back, arrow arum. Like, they were like, nature was telling us what should be here, what was here before then, and it was still in the seed bank, and it was just waiting to see the light of day to come back. And that's a beautiful thing. That's the type of thing stunning. We love hearing. The land has a certain memory. I totally agree. One of the things we wanted to touch on that I loved about your book is you kind of approach things as an ecosystem, not a space. It's function and functionality, and what should these plants, if they're in the right place, they're performing the right function and they're happy. And I thought that was really novel, just because our listeners, we get asked a lot, about should we amend soil for planting? I want to plant this plant and it likes dry conditions, but I want to put it in a wet condition. Can I amend it? And I really think that question is a gross misunderstanding of where plants belong. And I feel what you talk about in your book kind of really answers that question. Maybe not the way they want it to be answered. Because I really feel that if you're planting the plant in the right place, it doesn't need to be amended. There's, everything has a place where it's happy, and when you try to alter that, sometimes plants aren't happy. What is your best advice to our listeners for that kind of scenario?
Yeah, so I think the first lesson I learned as a planting designer is that plants never lie. They will always tell you the truth. You can't make them do something they don't want to do. Yeah. So the sooner you understand what they need, the better. So
you have to listen, yeah.
You have to listen, yes. And I find that some of the world's best planting designers, they have a gift for looking at plants and communities and reading them like an open book, and have a connection with that, and are able to interpret what plants are trying to tell you. Sometimes, in certain different, in a very nuanced way. So I think my advice would be to leave the vegetable garden, methods behind, and don't assume that every plant will be happy if you add a ton of compost and make the soils perfect. We all know that plants grow, anywhere on the planet, really, even in the toughest of conditions. So we all know that plants have very different requirements, but what they really need is they need three things to line up, or if you don't do that, planting will be doomed from day one. And this goes back to Philip Grimes' CSR strategy, the competitive strategies. So, and we try to build every single one of our designs on this foundation. We try to line up those three things. So the first one is site conditions. We know from Philip Grimes' strategy that sites can be stressful, they can be perfect with tons of good resources, or they can be subject to frequent disturbance. Most habitat types fall into one of these three, more or less. That's the first thing we need to understand. So the second thing we then need to understand is, after we've identified these conditions, what plant palette is appropriate. And here we often go to similar habitats in the wild to try to understand who evolved strategies to deal with these kind of conditions, and these are our plants. So now we have a site, we know what habitat type it is, we know a plant palette that will likely survive on that. But that's not enough. If you stop there, it's doomed. The third thing you need is a management strategy that lines up with your first 2 points. If your management changes the site conditions, it's doomed, because the plants will change. If your management, adjusts new plants or brings new species into the mix, they won't match your site conditions, it's doomed. So really all three things, your site conditions, your plant palette, and how you manage it, need to line up to make a more or less stable planting that, won't turn into a maintenance nightmare or fall apart the second you plant it. So an example would be, for example, if you are planting a green roof system, you can very clearly see it's probably going to be a pretty stressful site, with dry conditions, probably shallow soil media, high UV intensity, probably high pH, you name it, stressful. Yeah. Okay, we got our habitat. Now we go and find plants for that. We'll probably look for, maybe dry grassland, prairie species, succulents, you name it. That's the second one. But the third piece we need for this green roof to be successful is a management strategy that will match that. That means if that management strategy turns on irrigation water, we're changing the site conditions, it's doomed, because these plants will die, right? So if that doesn't line up, that's the third piece, then we're not going anywhere. So in all of our plantings, we try to approach it this way. It's like the holy trinity of planting design. And that elevates management, to where it needs to be. It needs to be part of the thought process from, the first second you're even putting, pencil to paper.
What struck me about your response, even though we're talking about functionality, that was a very emotional response. And it's when you, which I love, and that's one of the things I love about hearing you speak. It's hard not to be romantic about these types of conditions, even though we're talking about functionality. We're still talking about a thing of beauty that we have a emotional connect with, and I think it's just, are you ready to hear that?
And that was kind of my reaction, was that's going to be, for a lot of people, it's almost like a hard pill to swallow, because they get so attached to a plant because of its aesthetic. And I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head, but they really want a certain plant because they love the flowers, they love the leaves, they love something about it, but they don't have the site condition, or they don't have the management plan for it, and then they get really upset when it fails, almost to the point where they just keep trying and trying and trying because they just want to. I've even done this with cardinal flowers.
I've done this.
I've done it too. Yeah,
I want cardinal flowers so bad, and I'll just keep planting it, even though it hasn't worked, and it probably would never work if I just keep trying the same thing. But it's tough for a lot of, and I know when I consult with people a little bit on their home gardens, that's just kind of the feedback I give them is like, if it's, you got to make sure you're choosing the right stuff for the conditions, or you're fighting an uphill battle the whole time.
You know, and it's and so many times there's so many other factors. We're trying to make something natural of an unnatural condition, and there's factors that you can't control, which means that trying to restore something to what we consider native isn't necessarily always possible, because it's not a native condition. So one of the things that in your book that you discuss is that maybe there's no going back. Like in some places, like if a city's a city, it's not going to be what it was before it was a city. And actually, Enrique Sala talked about that. He's like, New York City is about as unnatural as you can get, and it's not going back. You know, so it's how do you proceed from there, and where do you go? And it's what's the new norm. So one of the quotes that stood out to me in the book was, "What we see growing together now is only one possible version. Countless other plants will work together if they just have the chance to meet in the wild or in cultivation," which I think is so true. And since you've adopted this, how have you seen its success going forward? Is it met with open arms as you're doing this and presenting this?
Well, this is really not something that, we invented. I think that's what horticulture has done since there has been horticulture, right?
Yeah.
So I think it all depends on, the skill level of a, designer or a gardener, because this, combining species from different, areas in one country or from different parts of the world requires a deeper understanding of these plants and how they would behave with one another. So it's very much based on the skill and experience. It's a little bit of experimentation on the gardener's side, but I think it can work. What is important to say, though, is that we're not advocating here for, bringing plants from everywhere and combining everything with one another. I think that what we see growing together in, wild systems, even in, systems that have naturally sorted themselves out and are not actually planted by people. But these things are always one of the greatest inspirations for our work, because it gives us an opportunity to really study how these plants nestle with one another and how they share spatial or temporal niches. They allow us to understand more about how we can bring the highest amount of functional and biological diversity into a planting by not thinking about, one plant beside another, but how possibly could we put one on top of the other, using their metabolisms and life cycles as an advantage, all with the goal to create more abundance in, our planted areas and to increase functional diversity as much. So I think it's a wonderful thing to see that many more combinations and plant communities are possible than what we see in the wild, but we also have to be really careful when we design these things and do our homework, because it may fail if we don't.
One of the things that whenever we have a discussion like this, one of the things that we always see push and pull on is pollinators and wildlife, and what those plants do. They encourage native pollinators and wildlife? Do they encourage I don't want to say invasive, but non-native, I guess, pollinators and wildlife, which it's hard to say because there's so much non-native stuff here. It's hard to, I'm even to a point where I don't know how to answer those questions. Everyone wants to be a purist to a sense, but is that even feasible or possible? Do you, when you're designing and you're taking these approaches, do you factor in pollinators and wildlife? Is that I guess it depends on the job or depends on the scenario, but is that something that you look at when you're
It is absolutely part of our DNA. Every single project, even if it is more a traditional blocked planting for a commercial setting, we will always include as many species as we can with really high pollinator value, or being host plants, or just having that functionality. Because I totally believe that creating ecologically dead planting is just not the solution. We cannot do that.
Yeah.
I think we have this incredible privilege right now to be on the design team for the new pollinator and bird garden at Penn Arboretum up in State College, Pennsylvania. And we are part of an amazing team there, working both with Harlan Patch and entomology department at the university, as well as DDA Design Studio out of Colorado, and incredible manager of the Arboretum, Sherry Edelson. And this project is really exciting because the entire design is very much based on giving these pollinators and birds a foundation for life. And that does not only include just putting the right kind of plants in there. It also includes, habitat, water, connections to other remnants of native areas. All of these other pieces that insects and birds, life really needs beyond food. And I think just from this one project, we learned so many more things that we can now fold into other projects that make them richer. And many times our clients have no idea we're doing this, but we believe it needs to be done. And we take this very seriously. I think that there is opportunity in making even a simple, green mulch planting around a few shrubs more ecologically valuable by doing your homework and seeing what can you sneak in, what choices can you make to make it better, to squeeze every bit of function out of every square foot we get our hands on. I think that's the level of intervention that we need right now. And it's really, I think our profession has to stand up to this. Landscape architects and beyond, it is no longer good enough to just design. I think it requires every one of us to help with this now and not wait.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny. I think we probably have more information at our fingertips, and we've learned more probably in the last 10 years than we've learned in the previous 100 years as far as a lot of these interactions go. And we're just really, I think, realizing how much we don't know or how much information we've lost.
So true. Yeah.
Because maybe we didn't, like Sam Droege with cataloging native bees, like they're like, we've just started. We're just learning. We don't even know what has already perished that we have no knowledge of what they were and why they're gone, but at least
precisely.
There's something now. So we're constantly learning. It's just one of it's just one of those things where it's hard to pinpoint what's right. It's I don't think any of us can really say what's right, and that's a constant battle. But as long as we're all working to the same common goal, it's if you still get that same connection and that same emotional response, is it wrong? Probably not. Probably not.
And just to add to your point there, I think that there's so much we don't know. I couldn't agree more. It's really hard sometimes to decide, should I use this species, which is really good for short-tongued bees, or am I benefiting Lepidoptera today? And there, just because maybe this one plant attracts 10 species and the other one only 5, doesn't mean we have all the data yet to make that decision. So there's no way we know enough at this point to really make best decisions with our designs. But I think there's one thing we can all do to still do a really good job at ecologically intensifying planting. And that is to make planting more abundant, to add more plants. I think nurseries love hearing that, right?
Yeah.
But more of everything to it, and fill these voids that are so, it's like an epidemic in horticulture right now, that we're accepting gaps everywhere. But just by filling them with more plants, I think we're squeezing so much more function, not just for pollinators, but think about stormwater, soil treatment, carbon sequestration, the list is really long, into even smaller spaces. I think that there is opportunity here too, that's just through layered planting and being smart about how we nestle plants with one another, in addition to thinking about pollinators and all that.
Yeah,
can improve every single, space that we create.
And plants will figure it out. Their job is to survive. If you squeeze them in, they'll make it work. If you look in nature, there's no open spots. By design.
Very few.
It's or very few. It's they'll find a way to survive, and that's a great point actually. I think the important thing is are we asking the right questions, which I think we are, and what we see as in any industry, like there's still nurseries that grow invasives, exotic invasives, because they can sell them and they make money, and it doesn't connect with them why they shouldn't do it because they've been doing it for so long. So it's changing that mindset just to at least ask that question and think about those things. And I think if you are, is there really a right or wrong? I guess what I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to show it and show what an alternative could look like and demonstrate why there is a market surrounding this alternative and, what it takes to be in that market to get certain people's attention. So,
I think if you educate the general public and they know not to ask for those plants and ask for something else, it's an opportunity for these. You may be doing this much business doing this, but there's a big opportunity out there if you open your mind to
I
it.
agree.
So,
Yeah.
So I did want
And it surprises me. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, you go. I'm changing the topics.
It surprises me how many of our clients are now asking for something different, something that differs from what they learned from their parents, how they thought, residential landscapes look. And, they've had moments that opened their eyes. It might be watching a certain, show on TV or listening to your podcast or just a hike that was like an epiphany and something clicked. And I find it encouraging to see clients not only, they're across the board in many different, communities having these moments of waking up and demanding more than your decoration. And I find that really encouraging and hopeful for our future.
I do too. And I think with the pandemic, people, and we've mentioned this plenty over the last year, have found a new way to connect with nature because, you were limited with what you could do. You couldn't go to dinner. You couldn't go to a movie or walk through a mall. You wanted to get out. You connected with nature. And I think this was new for a lot of people or life-changing for me. It really brought back a different passion for me, I think, for work. Just stepping away from it and enjoying it and not doing it for a job.
Yeah, it's meaningful.
Yes.
I think that's really inspiring, and that gives us a lot of energy as we tackle sometimes difficult or clients or complex projects. So every now and then it helps circle back to why we are doing this and lift ourselves up, and that gives new energy to plow forward.
Exactly.
So I am going to change the topic a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
Because we have such a great designer or landscape designer on here right now, I want to make sure we ask some design questions for our listeners at home who might be working on their home garden or planning out a new garden in their home. You've touched on some key things I know you really like with the using plants instead of mulch, stacking plants, integrating that vertical. What are those the big takeaways that you want that at-home gardener to change how they garden? Like starting out with not using mulch and using plants. What are some of the other keys that you really like to see with home gardeners?
I think maybe one of the most important ones is to not hold back on plants. Indulge. Have more of what you love. Not just one. Go shopping. Buy them smaller so you can afford it. But fill the spaces with the things that bring you joy. Either the plants directly or the creatures that these plants bring into your garden that then in return bring you joy every single day. Make it a paradise. Invite life and be daring. just trust your instinct. Many of us still feel what is right. We evolved in a natural environment. And a few hundred years of living in cities or just a few decades of multiculture have not wiped that out. I think we instinctively still know what is beautiful. Think about the hike you did in spring when all the Virginia bluebells were covering this entire valley and how that made you feel. Why shouldn't we have any less in our gardens?
Yeah, and there's really no right or wrong. Like, you can be creative with this. There's principles you want to follow, but you can, the sky's the limit. So that's great advice. Yeah. That's great advice.
I agree. And not to be afraid, right? Just really go for it. Yeah.
You can't mess up.
The only mistake you could make is not having plants in your garden and letting some mulch industry tell you that this is the way you should be doing things, because that is not the truth.
Yeah, that's very true. So I have a question for you, and this is one of my favorite questions to ask people, because you are so good at this and so passionate about this. Did you always know that this is where your path would lead? Like, what was your journey to get here?
That's a really good question. I think so after the wall fell in Germany, my family started a plant nursery and a small design build firm. So I learned the craft of propagating plants and working with them, as well as managing planting long-term from a super early age on. And, I loved it. But, as a rebellious teenager, I think I left that world for a little bit to see what else is out there. But then I circled back to it because, quite honestly, the older I got, the more I realized how much I love nature and how much it needs our help. So I learned, I studied with Wolfgang Oehme van Sweden, a very inspirational planting designer, landscape architect, who brought, in many ways, working with perennials to the United States, and was one of the first people in this country here who used perennials in huge massings, in very exuberant, daring combinations, to not just covering a few feet, but square miles with planting. Yeah. And it inspired me so much what these types of plantings gave people back, how they not only gave joy, but also, actually created lower maintenance in some areas and brought life back. So that was really one of the moments when I realized I would like to do that too. But I don't want to do this just from a horticultural perspective to please people. I think the times have changed. We live in a different universe now. Yeah. I think that every single opportunity we have with planting can do way more than that. It's an opportunity to bring plants back, not just into the gardens, but we all know that plants escape gardens. And these spontaneous plants at some point become part of nearby ecosystems. So I see every planting not only as something that pleases people and pollinators and all that, but also as an opportunity to enrich the ecosystems that surround a particular project site. And with that, our profession has a lot more power, and it's much more important than we sometimes, are led to believe.
Yeah.
So I think that's really gratifying.
I love those stories. I love that aha moment. Tom, I don't even know if you know this, but before I came to Pinelands, I contemplated making a career change. So I was in a position, I was the sales manager at Princeton Nurseries, and they had decided to close the doors. So at that point, I knew I had to find a new job, but was like, now I can make a change. I never, I never felt at that point it was my calling. Coming to Pinelands Nursery was my aha moment, where I'm like, this is what I want to do. This is what I was missing. Being on this side of the industry, it gave me purpose and meaning that I didn't kind of feel I had on the other end of the industry. So that was like my aha moment, where I was like, this is like it. So I love hearing how that hit you. That was so,
and it's still evolving.
yes. Definitely.
To be continued. Yeah.
So I know we were trying to keep it to a certain time limit, and we're at about that. So we should probably try to wrap it up a little bit. So we have just like a couple quick questions and then final thoughts. We're curious if there's another book in the works.
Well, Thomas and I are starting the process. Just through the last few years of, spending more time practicing what we preach. And after we started Phyto Studio, now really getting these projects under our belt and using this approach, this method, and an incredible diversity of project types. I feel that there's something is evolving. We have something to say again, and we're in the very early stages of understanding how to articulate that and how to give this knowledge to people. So yes. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, we're excited about that. So our last question always, and it's always the most important question, is what is your favorite native plant?
Oh, goodness. I couldn't answer this. It changes by the day and sometimes by the hour.
Well, what would it be right now?
So right now, I think I have this love affair with violets. This is a time of year when you really see them shine, when other perennials are starting to go dormant and they have wintergreen foliage, and the fact just spread their seed is really so obvious. And in many places, they are some of the last remaining ground covers now that will carry a planting through the winter until, fresh life emerges in the spring. I love the resilience of them and the fact that they don't need human life support to be a part of planting, a very, long-lived one. And the fact that they can, even if you just introduce a few in your new planting, find open ground on their own and not require enormous resources to fill gaps. They're really beautiful, and apparently Lepidoptera really depend on them quite a bit, according to Doug Tallamy's list. So yeah, I think it's violets right now.
Yeah, that's a great choice. And speaking of Dr. Tallamy, do you want to? Can we? Tom, do you want to say?
Well, I guess we have to.
Yeah, yeah.
But so he's actually going to be our next guest. We've been kicking around the idea of having him on for a while, and he actually, in coordinating when he was going to come on, he told us to tell you hello as well. So he wanted to say hi.
Nice.
So he's coming to be on next week.
Yeah. So that's we're excited about that. But that's a great choice. Yeah, I love hearing that. Do you have growing up in Europe and then moving to North America and having traveled? Do you have a favorite wild space that it could be a forest, a park, a prairie? Is there one place that you've visited that just really had an emotional connect with you that you kind of might say, this is one of my favorite places?
I think the answer might surprise you.
Okay.
What I find most exciting and inspiring are actually the wild spaces I see in cities like Baltimore, where vacant lots have come down and I see vegetation reclaiming sometimes contaminated bare ground, rubble, right?
Yeah.
For me, what I learned from just, walking on my hands and knees, crawling through these spaces and understanding how this process happens can be not only hopeful, but it teaches me so much, in addition to the many, many I do, sometimes monthly, other natural areas. But so I think, accepting wild not only as, a nature area or a park somewhere, but the wild that is right under our noses. That is super fascinating.
It's funny because Dr. Sala, when he was on, talked about Chernobyl and how since it's uninhabited, nature is kind of reclaiming it and taking over, and how interesting that is. Just, when, we'll kind of end it the same way we started it, and you're thinking, have we done too much damage? Is it too late? That's a prime example of that. It's not. Nature will find a way. It's coming back on its own. So
absolutely,
that's a great way. So we always end up the podcast with a final thought. So this is where we give you the floor. Anything, if you want to summarize, if you want to add anything, promote anything, talk about anything, this is your spotlight. You can say whatever you want.
So I think to sum it up, I would love to address your listeners directly and just say how important it is that we all understand that the world we live in is the world we make, that every opportunity we have to use plants to make it better should not be wasted. There's really a sense of urgency here, and I truly believe that every single plant counts, and every single space is connected to another space that will benefit from you simply adding a beneficial plant to it, and taking ownership of this problem. I really think that the way to a better future will start with the actions of every one of us, no matter where we are in the world or which, part of the profession we live in, work in. So I wish you all the energy and the passion to be part of this army who is really trying to make a change right now. So with that, I just want to thank you for having me. And once again, thank you for all your passion and the hard and thoughtful work that goes into the podcast. And I can't wait to listen to many exciting future episodes here soon. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Tom, do you want to go or would you like me to go?
Mine's fairly quick, but I've gotten to see Claudia speak numerous times now. And so Claudia, you were actually one of the people that really made me think of garden design, not looking at from that landscape architect overhead view with the graph paper and the circles and more kind of just tilt it to how you'd actually be looking at it and just thinking of the verticals. You need that ground cover, you need that next layer, and then you just have a couple things that are coming out through the canopy of that. And I never really thought about designing a garden that way until you'd really made that flip, that 90-degree flip in my mind. But and then one of the other times I saw you, I got this from my dad, but we're like super cheap when we go to conferences, and we always drive and leave super early in the morning before we go, and we never get hotels.
Yeah.
Like anywhere we go, we never get hotels.
You commute.
We'd rather leave at 2 in the morning than stay overnight. But there was one time I don't remember what conference it is, but I did that, and I left it super early in the morning, and I got there and was really excited to hear your talk. And your voice is just so soothing that it actually put me to sleep. So I'm hoping that we get some double listens here. People listen the first time for the content, and then maybe when they listen, they can put it on later tonight, and it'll just kind of soothe them off.
Soothe
to
them
sleep
off.
tonight.
Soothe nice.
Well, thank you, Tom.
Nice thoughts. All right. So my final thought is when it comes to ecological thinking or native plants, don't draw a line in the sand with what your perspective is, because you know what, plants don't do that. Plants will intermingle and they'll fill the open spaces. Do the same way with your thinking. No one particular train of thought is correct. We all have the same goal. We've on the podcast had guests that came from so many different angles, but everyone's goal was the same. And working together, all those things, we can all achieve what it is we're hoping to achieve. So don't be so strict with your thoughts that you're discounting other things when everything has a benefit that we're all trying to get that same thing. So be open-minded, don't draw a line in the sand, and just kind of hear all the sides and kind of it can all work together, and that's what we're hoping. That's the only way this is going to work, is if it all works together. So,
all right. So
was that too deep?
Oh, that was good.
Well said.
That was a good deep one. Well, that wraps it up. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoy listening to Claudia West. Make sure you purchase her book, which we never said the name of.
We did not.
Which is Planting in a Post-Wild World. And that's written by herself. And then her partner, Thomas Rainier, who they're partners at Phyto Studio. Pick it up at a local bookstore. I think I saw it on Amazon as well. There's a bunch of places you can get it. But Fran got to read it. I've only read a portion of it, but I've heard so many great things about it. So thank you guys for listening to Native Plants, Healthy Planet, presented by Pinelands Nursery.
As always, we'd love to give a big thank you to Stephen Marr for contributing our theme music. You can follow us on Twitter at Pineland Nursery, Facebook at Pinelands Nursery NJ, Instagram at Pinelands Nursery, and YouTube at Pinelands Nursery. We do have the question and answer line, and people have started to call, so please make sure you call us at 215-346-6189. Ask us a question, leave us a comment. If we pick your question or comment, we'll play it on a future episode of The Buzz. I think we're kind of limiting it to The Buzz to keep things running smooth. And let's not forget the Native Plants Healthy Planet Facebook group. You guys have been great. We have a ton of new members, so keep the conversation going over there.
So you can listen to Native Plants Healthy Planet directly at www.nativeplantshealthyplanet.com. You can also check us out on Apple Podcasts. That's where we get the 5-star reviews that we like to shout out now when they come in.
A lot of people not saying it yet, but we picked in the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've gotten 7 new 5-star reviews, which is wonderful. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
And write something too. We like it when people write stuff.
Yeah.
So it's nice it's a little confidence boost. So you can also listen to us on Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you consume your podcast. We're on Pandora now, I think.
We are on Pandora now, yeah.
You can even ask Alexa to play the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, and stay tuned. This is a great episode. Stay tuned for next week. This is a guest that we were hoping to have on since the beginning. We just wanted to get enough street cred to have him on. So.
Yeah.
But with that, thanks everyone. I'm Tom.
And I am Fran. Thanks again, everyone. We will see you again next time. Until then, keep it native.
Thank you for listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Remember to like, share, follow, and comment.